The last summer before real adulthood crept in was supposed to be simple. No plans, no pressures, just two best friends sharing a creaky old rental house a few blocks from the beach, pretending for a little while longer that life would always be like this. Lazy. Golden. Endless. It was a small town. The kind of place where the grocery clerk knew your coffee order, and the biggest news was when the diner added a new flavor of pie. For me, it was a familiar kind of comfort. For him, for Ryan, it was freedom. College had worn him out, the constant chase of something bigger, better, faster. Out here, there were only bonfires, cold beers, and the sound of the ocean humming just beyond the dunes. We moved in at the start of June, dragging battered duffel bags and boxes of old memories behind us. Ryan tossed his stuff into the biggest room without a second thought, flashing that grin. The one that always undid me, though he'd never know it. I claimed the smaller room, the one with the window facing the overgrown backyard, where the fireflies swarmed at dusk like floating embers. By day, we worked odd jobs. He helped rebuild decks and paint houses. I sketched designs for a local shop that sold handmade jewelry. By night, we lived like kids again, barefoot, sunburned, reckless with our laughter. Sometimes we lit a fire pit in the yard, burning driftwood and marshmallows until the embers crackled low and our voices grew soft with sleepiness. There was a kind of magic to those nights, a trick of the smoke and starlight that made everything seem possible. Even the impossible feelings I kept hidden under my skin. I had loved Ryan for longer than I cared to admit. Not just the way you love a friend. Not the easy, uncomplicated way. It was sharper than that. Deeper. Something that made my heart stutter when he slung an arm over my shoulders, or when he'd laugh and the sound would fill up a whole room like sunlight pouring through a window. But he was him. The guy who dated girls without even trying, who tossed casual bro jokes into conversations without thinking twice. The idea that he might feel anything beyond friendship for me was laughable. Cruel, even. So I buried it. Year after year. Like seeds that would never sprout, no matter how much I secretly watered them. Still, sometimes, when the fire was low and the world felt blurry around the edges, I'd catch him looking at me differently. Longer. Like he was trying to figure out something just out of reach, and I'd let myself wonder, for one reckless heartbeat, if maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. But then he'd yawn, stretch, make some dumb joke, and the moment would snap shut like a trapdoor. No. Ryan was my best friend. That was all he would ever be. The thought should have been enough to steady me, but that summer had a strange kind of gravity to it. Every glance felt heavier, every touch burned longer. Something was shifting between us, slow and inevitable, like the tide pulling at the shore. I felt it in the quiet spaces between our conversations. I felt it in the way he lingered in doorways, in the way his laughter sometimes faltered when our eyes met. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I'd survive it, just like I always had. But deep down, even then, I think I knew. That summer would change everything. Days slid into weeks like beads on a string, the rhythm of summer settling into something familiar, and yet, not. Everything felt the same on the surface. We still laughed over burnt pancakes in the morning, still argued about what movie to watch at night. We still roughhoused like we were kids again, wrestling over the remote, collapsing in breathless heaps on the worn-out couch. But something was different this time. I could feel it crackling in the air between us, subtle as static, sharp enough to make my skin prickle whenever he got too close. The touches were innocent. They had to be. A brush of his hand against mine when we both reached for the salt. A bump of shoulders as we navigated the tiny kitchen. His knee pressing against mine on the couch, neither of us moving away. Little things. Meaningless, I told myself. But they lingered longer than they should have. His hand would stay against mine a second too long. His gaze would catch mine and hold, unblinking, until I had to look away, my chest too tight to breathe properly. One evening, we made dinner together, something simple, tacos and cheap beer. And somewhere between slicing onions and arguing about whose turn it was to do dishes, he leaned across me to grab a plate. His chest brushed against my back, solid and warm, and I froze like a deer in headlights. "You okay, dude?" he asked, voice low, almost teasing. I forced a laugh, mumbling something about onions making my eyes water. He didn't push. He just handed me the plate with a half smile, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Or maybe he didn't know at all, and I was just hopelessly, painfully, desperately reading into everything. Later that night, we sprawled on the couch with a movie playing, some dumb action flick neither of us were really watching. Ryan stretched, yawning, and his hand fell casually onto my forearm. Heavy. Familiar. Too much. I felt every nerve in my body light up like fireworks under my skin. I stared at the TV, pretending not to notice, pretending not to care, while inside, my heart was tearing itself apart. This was torture. Pure, exquisite torture. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that it was all in my head. Ryan was touchy with everyone. He didn't have the same boundaries I did, didn't overthink every casual brush of skin. But then there were the things he said, things that made the ground under me tilt just a little. "You know," he said once, during a lazy afternoon of video games and junk food, "I don't know what I'd do if you ever moved away. Probably lose my damn mind." It should have been a joke. It sounded like a joke. But when I glanced at him, he wasn't laughing. And then there was the way he reacted when I casually mentioned, in passing, that I'd matched with a guy on a dating app. He went quiet, not joking, not teasing, just quiet. His jaw tightened. He shrugged like it didn't matter, like he didn't care. But he didn't meet my eyes for the rest of the night. Later, as I brushed my teeth, I replayed the conversation over and over, searching for clues, for reasons, for hope I didn't dare feel. Maybe he was just being protective. That was all. Best friends worried about each other. Maybe he didn't like the idea of me dating because it meant less time for Halo marathons and late-night pizza runs. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was something. The tension between us stretched, thinner with every passing day, a tightrope pulled taut over a canyon of unspoken words. One wrong step, and we would fall into something we couldn't crawl back from. Sometimes late at night I lay awake in my little room, listening to the soft creak of the house, the distant roar of the ocean, and his breathing, steady and close, just beyond the wall. And I'd wonder how much longer I could keep pretending I didn't want more. How much longer before pretending wasn't enough. The night started like every other half-forgotten summer night, laughter rolling over. The dunes, cheap beer warming in our hands, the bonfire crackling against the dark velvet sky. Ryan and I stuck close, like we always did, orbiting each other even when surrounded by a dozen other voices. The beach party wasn't much, a few locals, some college friends passing through town. But after weeks of the same slow, sticky days, it felt electric. Ryan was magnetic that night, in the way he always was when he let himself relax, telling dumb stories, tossing his head back when he laughed, bumping his shoulder into mine every chance he got. Each casual touch left a slow-burning brand against my skin. We stumbled back to the rental house sometime after midnight, shoes dangling from our fingers, shirts clinging to our damp skin. The streetlights made pools of gold along the cracked sidewalks, and we weaved between them, drunk on more than beer. Drunk on the night, the closeness, the endless possibility that clung to the air. When we reached the house, Ryan fumbled with the door, muttering curses under his breath while I leaned against the porch railing, heart thudding too fast. I knew better than to hope. Knew better than to read too much into the way his eyes lingered on me when he finally got the door open. Still, when he clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing just a little too tight, I let myself close my eyes for a second. Just to feel it. "Night, man," he said, voice soft, rough around the edges. "Night," I whispered back. I made it to my room without falling apart, stripped down to my boxers, collapsed into bed. The fan overhead stirred the humid air, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning under my ribs. I lay there for a long time, listening to the creaks of the house settling, the distant hiss of the ocean. Sleep pulled at me in heavy waves, but my heart, traitorous, stubborn, stayed wide awake. Somewhere between dreams and consciousness, I heard it, the soft click of my door easing open. The mattress dipped under a sudden weight, and I startled, blinking into the dark. "Hey," Ryan whispered. His voice was low, unsteady. "You awake?" I swallowed, throat dry. "Yeah." He sat at the edge of the bed, head bowed, fingers laced together tightly. Moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the sharp line of his jaw, the tense hunch of his shoulders. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, he spoke, voice so quiet I had to strain to hear. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, man. I feel lost." I shifted, propping myself up on one elbow. "What do you mean?" He let out a shaky breath, scrubbing a hand over his face. Everything feels different lately. Like I don't know where I'm supposed to go, who I'm supposed to be. And His voice cracked. "I don't want to lose you." Something inside me splintered. "You won't," I said fiercely before I could think better of it. "I'm not going anywhere." Ryan turned his head, meeting my gaze in the dim light. There was something raw there, something unguarded. His hand found my knee, a shaky touch that sent a jolt straight through me. His thumb brushed lightly over the fabric of my sleep shorts, back and forth, like he didn't even realize he was doing it. The air between us tightened, thick enough to drown in. I opened my mouth. To say what? I didn't know. But before I could speak, he leaned in. Not a kiss. Not yet. He reached out, tentative, fingers brushing the mess of hair at my forehead. His touch was feather-light, trembling. He traced the curve of my brow with the back of his knuckles, a ghost of a caress. Then he pressed his lips, so gently it barely counted, to the center of my forehead. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sexual. It was devastating. He stayed there for a long, breathless moment, forehead resting against mine, like he was trying to breathe me in, to make me real. I didn't move. Couldn't move. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were glassy, mouth parted like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Instead, he shifted down onto the mattress beside me, his body a solid, trembling line against mine, tentative at first, then closer, closer still, until his arm slipped around my waist like it had always belonged there. I lay there, heart pounding against my ribs, every nerve on fire, as Ryan's breathing evened out against the crook of my neck. He fell asleep holding me. And I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, drowning in confusion and longing and fear so thick it choked the air from my lungs. Something had shifted tonight. Something huge, terrifying, and irreversible. And I had no idea what it would mean when the morning came. Morning came slow and heavy, like a wave pulling me under before I could catch my breath. For a moment, I didn't move. I lay still, letting the unfamiliar weight of him sink in. Ryan's arm, heavy and warm around my waist, his chest pressed against my back, breathing slow and even. His fingers had tangled lightly in the hem of my t-shirt sometime in the night, as if even in sleep he hadn't wanted to let go. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart thrumming painfully in my chest. I should move. I should get up before he woke and realized what a mistake he'd made. But I couldn't. I stayed frozen, caught between the sharp edges of hope and fear, memorizing every sensation like it might be ripped away at any second. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Drunken sleepovers. Drunken. Mistakes. Nothing more. Still, the way he held me, like I was something precious, made it nearly impossible to believe my own lies. The minutes stretched thin and brittle. Then Ryan stirred behind me, a soft groan rumbling low in his throat. His grip tightened for a second, instinctive, before he went rigid, awareness slicing through the sleepy haze. I felt it the moment it happened, the shift from warmth to panic. Slowly he pulled his arm back, putting careful inches between us. I rolled onto my back, pretending to stretch, pretending I hadn't noticed anything unusual, even as my pulse hammered in my throat. Ryan sat up, scrubbing both hands over his face. His hair was a mess, sticking up in every direction. His shoulders were tense, pulled tight under the faded t-shirt he must have grabbed sometime during the night. For a long moment, he just stared down at the floor, silent. Then he spoke, voice rough and too loud in the heavy air between us. I was just drunk, tired. He laughed, a thin, broken sound. Sorry, man. Didn't mean to crowd you. The words landed like stones in my chest. I forced a smile. Forced a laugh that felt like it cracked something deep inside me. Don't worry about it, I said, voice too casual, too bright. You were out of it. He nodded quickly, too quickly. Yeah, out of it. Neither of us looked at each other. The weight of the night before, the touch, the closeness, the tenderness, was erased in a heartbeat. Shoved into a box labeled mistake and buried under awkward laughter and excuses. And I let him, because what else could I do? I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the bed, suddenly desperate for space, for air. Ryan muttered something about needing coffee and fled the room like the walls were caving in. I stayed behind, staring at the rumpled sheets, at the small, crumpled imprint his body had left beside mine. The same body that had curled around me like a lifeline only hours ago. He didn't remember. Or maybe, worse, he remembered exactly and wanted to forget. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, willing the burn there to fade. Last night had meant everything to me, to him. It was nothing more than an accident born of too much beer and not enough sleep. The room felt colder without him in it. Colder still with the knowledge that whatever fragile thing had cracked open between us last night had already been slammed shut. And maybe this time, there wouldn't be any way back. The days that followed were a slow, grinding misery. We moved around each other like ghosts in that tiny house. Awkward, silent, brittle. Every conversation was clipped, functional. Pass the salt. You left the bathroom light on. Did you pick up more detergent? It was like we'd both agreed, without speaking, to pretend that night had never happened. And maybe he could. But I couldn't. Every time I caught a glimpse of him, hunched over his cereal bowl in the mornings, scrolling mindlessly through his phone at night, the weight of it crushed down harder on my chest. Was it really just the beer? Was I pathetic for wanting it to have meant more? Was I pathetic for wanting him? Shame simmered under my skin, slow and ugly, anger too, white-hot flashes that came out of nowhere, leaving me breathless with it. I hated that he could pretend. Nothing had changed. I hated that I couldn't. I hated myself most of all, for still wanting him, even now. The tension between us stretched tighter with every passing day. Something had to snap eventually. I just didn't know when, or how badly it would break when it did. It happened on a Tuesday night of all things, a stupid fight over dishes. The sink was piled high, crusted with the wreckage of dinners we barely spoke through. The house smelled like stale beer and resentment. I stood there, scrubbing angrily at a frying pan, feeling the fury boil under my skin. Ryan wandered in, barefoot, shirtless, yawning like he hadn't noticed the thick, choking silence between us. You could have at least rinsed the plates, he muttered, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. I froze. You could do them yourself for once, I snapped back, slamming the pan into the drying rack harder than necessary. Ryan turned, eyebrow arching. Jesus, man. What's your problem? I dropped the sponge into the sink, water splashing up my arms. My problem. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Maybe it's that I'm sick of pretending everything's fine when it's not. His face hardened. What the hell are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. My voice shook with the effort of holding it in, holding it together. That night, Ryan went still, water bottle half raised to his mouth. For a second, just a second, something raw flickered across his face. I told you, he said finally, low and sharp. It didn't mean anything. I was drunk. Bullshit, I snapped, stepping closer. You weren't that drunk, Ryan. You held me. You touched me like you meant it. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle ticking under his skin. Why did you come into my room that night? I demanded. Why, if it didn't mean anything? The silence that followed was so thick it roared in my ears. Ryan slammed the water bottle down on the counter, the plastic crumpling with the force. Because I needed you, he shouted, voice cracking. Because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and I didn't know how else to ask for you without ruining everything. I stared at him, stunned. Chest heaving. Ryan scrubbed, both hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. I thought if I just stayed close enough, maybe you'd get it without me having to say it, he said, voice ragged. I thought I could keep you without screwing it all up. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. You think you didn't screw it up? I whispered, the words ripping themselves free. You think pretending it didn't happen, pretending I don't happen, didn't already ruin it? He stopped pacing, turned toward me. For the first time in weeks, really looked at me. I saw it then. All of it. The fear. The guilt. The desperate, aching want he'd tried so hard to bury. It hit me like a punch to the gut. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The house creaked around us. The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside, the ocean kept on breathing in and out, steady and endless. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again, swallowing hard. I didn't trust myself to speak. Didn't trust myself not to fall apart if I did. The distance between us was still there, wide and broken. But now, for the first time, there was no pretending it wasn't real. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something we couldn't run from anymore. The fight left us both raw, hollowed out like driftwood. After the shouting had faded into silence, Ryan disappeared outside without a word. I stayed inside for a long time, staring blankly at the mess in the kitchen, hands trembling at my sides. I could have left it there, let him cool off, let myself bury it all again. But something inside me refused. This wasn't something we could sweep under the rug anymore. Not after everything. Not after him standing there, shouting that he needed me. So I grabbed a hoodie, shoved my bare feet into a pair of sneakers, and stepped out into the humid night. The sky was a sheet of black velvet stretched overhead, punched full of stars. The air smelled like salt and grass and something heavier. Like the night itself was holding its breath. I found him sitting at the edge of the porch steps, knees drawn up, elbows resting on them. His head was tipped back, staring at the stars like they might offer answers he couldn't find anywhere else. He heard me coming, but he didn't move. I sat down beside him, close but not touching. For a long time, we just sat there in silence, the night wrapping around us. Finally, he spoke, voice rough and low. "I'm sorry," he said. "For yelling. For everything." I shook my head, blinking fast against the sudden sting behind my eyes. "You don't have to be sorry," I whispered. He laughed under his breath. Not amused, but broken. "I don't even know where to start, man." "Start anywhere," I said, voice barely carrying. He raked a hand through his hair, eyes still fixed on the sky. "I've been confused for a long time," he said slowly. "Longer than I want to admit." He glanced at me, something raw and scared flashing in his eyes. "I grew up thinking, you know? There's one way to be. You date girls, you settle down, you tick all the right boxes. You're normal." His voice cracked a little. And for a while, it was easy to believe that was enough. He swallowed hard, staring down at his hands. But it never felt right. Not really. And then this summer... He laughed again, short and helpless. "Being around you, it made everything harder. Or maybe it made it clearer. I don't know." I sat frozen, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I kept trying to tell myself it was just missing you. Being scared of change, being scared of losing my best friend. He dragged his gaze up to mine, finally, and the air between us went very still. "But it's more than that," he said quietly. "It's always been more." I bit my lip, hard, tasting salt. I never wanted to pressure you, I choked out. Never wanted you to feel like you had to be something you're not. He shook his head fiercely. You didn't. You don't. This isn't about you making me feel anything. He pressed a fist to his chest, like he was trying to hold something inside. This is about me finally being honest with myself. The words hovered between us, fragile and terrifying. I reached out without thinking, my hand finding his in the dark. He flinched, not away, but like the contact had jolted something inside him. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand over in mine, fingers threading through mine with a trembling kind of hesitation, like he was scared I might pull away. I squeezed his hand, grounding us both. We sat like that for a long moment, palms pressed together, hearts pounding out uneven rhythms. Ryan leaned in, forehead bumping against mine clumsily, like he wasn't sure how to do this, but needed to try anyway. I closed my eyes, breathing him in. The familiar scent of salt, soap, and something uniquely him. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything neat or polished. It was two people, broken and scared, finding their way toward each other in the dark. I don't know what happens next, Ryan whispered against my skin. I smiled, small and shaky. Neither do I. We stayed like that under the stars, forehead to forehead, hand in hand, the night breathing quietly around us. No promises, no guarantees, just the terrifying, beautiful truth of being seen, and choosing to stay anyway. Morning broke soft and slow. The sky washed pale with the first light of dawn. The world was still wrapped in that delicate, hushed quiet that only came with early summer mornings. Before the heat, before the noise. I woke to the scratchy feel of the porch wood beneath me. The smell of salt and damp earth thick in the air. And Ryan, his hand still wrapped tightly in mine, like even in sleep he hadn't been willing to let go. I turned my head, blinking against the pale gold light. He was already awake, watching me with sleepy, uncertain eyes. For a second, we just stared at each other, the enormity of everything we'd said, and everything we hadn't, hanging between us. Then Ryan gave a nervous little laugh, scratching the back of his neck. Well, he said, voice hoarse, this is a new low for us. Passing out on the porch like a couple of frat guys. I laughed too. A real laugh this time. Shaky but genuine. The tension that had ruled every moment between us for days cracked open. Just a little. At least we didn't set anything on fire, I said, squeezing his hand lightly before letting go. He stretched, grimacing at the stiffness in his back. My spine may never forgive me. I stood slowly, offering him a hand up. Come, on, old man, I'll make breakfast. Ryan accepted my hand without hesitation, his fingers lingering longer than necessary as he got to his feet. Inside, we fell into the rhythm we knew so well, pulling out pans, cracking eggs, burning the toast because we were too busy bickering over who made the worst cup of coffee. It should have felt the same as all the mornings before. But it didn't. There was a new kind of awareness humming under my skin. A new kind of hope blooming, fragile and terrifying. Ryan leaned against the counter, sipping burnt coffee and watching me scramble eggs with exaggerated care. We're really bad at this, he said suddenly. I arched an eyebrow. At cooking? He grinned. That too. But I meant this talking, feelings. You know, adult stuff. I snorted, flipping the eggs onto a plate. Yeah, no kidding. He set his mug down and sobered a little. His eyes, when they found mine, were steady. Nervous, but steady. I don't have all the answers, he said quietly. I'm probably going to mess this up a lot. I set the plate down between us, heart thudding. Me too, I admitted. But I don't care. He smiled then. Slow, a little crooked, but so full of something real it made my chest ache. I just know I don't want to figure it out without you, he said. I blinked hard against the sudden burn in my eyes. Yeah, I breathed. Me either. For a moment we just stood there, inches apart, the smell of burnt toast and overcooked eggs wrapping around us like a memory. Then, slowly, carefully, Ryan reached out. His hand cupped my jaw, thumb brushing lightly over my cheekbone. His touch was trembling, hesitant, like he was giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. I leaned in, just a fraction. And that was all he needed. His lips met mine, slow and tentative. A question, not an answer. A beginning. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was real. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing me in like he still couldn't believe this was real. Neither could I. But maybe that was okay. Maybe, for once, change wasn't something to fear.